Hey, my name is Brent here on Cloudy with the Chance of Meeples. Today we are looking at the third installment in the Great Facades trilogy of expansions for Sagrada, a game that I like quite a bit. I like dice drafting, I like drafting, and this one has dice drafting, and it's got some lovely aesthetics, some translucent dice and whatnot, and this one actually introduces a brand new type of dice, and it is the strife dice. They are kind of gray and they will stress you out. But before I get ahead of myself, let me show you what's in this expansion and then we'll come back and talk my final forecasts. First, cue the thunder. So the radar overview for Sagrada Glory looks like this. Sagrada, a game that I like a lot, gave an 80% chance of meeples. If you don't know how to play Sagrada, check out my review. I'll link to that video in the description of this video. But what does Glory all include? I will say out of the three Great Facade expansions, Life, Glory, and Passion, this probably has the most content. It introduces a new die, much like the other two. And we're going to start with that. What does this group of gray dice do? Well, it brings a little bit more stress, or strife as they are called. These are the strife dice. Each game you'll have a different, if you're playing with this module, you'll use a different restriction as to where you can place these dice. So if this is the restriction, you may only place them in the top or bottom rows. Whereas this one, they may not be diagonally adjacent to others, may not be in the same row as other gray dice. So each of them will give you a little bit of restrictions as to how to place. Of course, they are gray, so they wouldn't have to be, they're kind of like a wild color. They're a sixth color essentially. So you cannot put them onto obviously a color restriction. You could put them on a number restriction, but of course you still have to follow what that says. So that's this module. At the same time, there are some public objectives to these dice. 6 points for every pair of gray dice with the same value. And then they also have some rivalry objectives, which I'll speak on momentarily. So these are scored, the player who has the greatest distance between two gray dice gets 5 points. Second greatest distance would go to the second player and they would get 5 points. So that's what these rivalry dice, or these rivalry public objectives do. And then, like I said, you have normal public objectives. That's what this module is. But what else comes in this one? Of course, there's a couple more tool cards, and they also all refer to the strife dice. So you'll want to be using one of these every time you're playing with the strife module. You get pioneer objectives, flourish cards, and more other objectives. Let's talk about these objectives. These are the rivalry objectives, and kind of like the strife ones, they are kind of given out, they are given out to players who achieve a certain objective the most times. So for instance, the color pairs, 12 points for the first player, 8 for the second, and 5 for the third, for the most diagonally adjacent pairs of the same color. So in this case, it would be 1, 2, 3. So you'd be competing against everybody else. It'll just bring a little bit more interaction with the players. Going from light to dark or dark to light, one or the other. So descending or ascending in numerical value in each column. Whoever has the most gets 12, second most 8, so on and so forth. So this is just another public objective in which you're trying to, in this case, you're going against your opponents. Normally, public objectives, you're just working on your own board and it doesn't matter what your opponents are doing. With these rivalry objectives, it matters what your opponents are doing. So more public objectives, but they work a little bit differently. And then what else do you got? You have flourish cards. If you take these flourish cards, you get 2 at the start of the game, and you will, it's just virtually another public or private objective, pardon me. If you can match this at the end of the game, you'll get 4 points. If you cannot, you get -4. So in this case, these two would have to be the same color and these two would have to be the same color anywhere on the board. So you can decide if you want to add those or not. And then the final thing is these Pioneer objectives. And these are races. So you put 3 out each game. First player to fill in the bottom 2 rows takes it 3 points. Okay, 3 points for the first player that can match, 3 on the top and 3 on the third row of the same value, or first to have 3 dice of one color or 1 dice of 3 value in the same row. So these will just bring a little bit more urgency, and you will be, again, looking at other players because they're virtually races. First player to get them takes it, and that's how many victory points they get. And some of them, this one's only 3, but if you can get, a whole row with 5 different colors, all of different values, 7 points, that could be quite big. And so you'll use 3 of these each game and just more variety. So like I said, this expansion has more content in comparison to the other 2 Great Facade expansions. Let's move on over now. Check out the final forecast. So the final forecast for Glory, does it live up to its name? Well, let's dive in. This one actually has the most content of the 3 Great Facade expansions. Passion, Life, now Glory. Passion introduced kind of player powers, a few new public objectives, which I really liked, as well as a rare glass dice. So a brand new dice color that was kind of like a wild color. It didn't attach itself to any color. So that was Passion. Life, on masterwork boards, kind of create your own restrictions and your own scoring possibilities. And those dice were orange, and I like that one a little bit less than Passion. So this one has by far the most content out of these 3 small expansions. And like I said at the top of the video, it has a brand new dice color, and these are kind of stress dice. They call them Strife, but they kind of are stress dice because, yes, they are a different color, so you will be able to have a little bit more flexibility as to it not being a red. So you can put it beside a red or what have you. But it also comes with placement. So more restrictions. So that's where kind of the stress comes in, because sometimes you play and you go to put them in the top and the bottom row, and then it's like, oh, that's really nice, but then you start putting them in the top and the bottom row, and then all of a sudden you need to draft dice from the dice pool, and there's just striped dice left to draft, or the only value that you can actually use is from striped dice, but it has to go in the top or the bottom row. So there are some, hindrances to these dice that make it a little bit more challenging. Of course, with that, you also get a few tool cards. You get 3 tool cards. You'll use one of these each game, and these correlate just to the striped dice. And then you have some rivalry public objectives as well as just normal public objectives that also translate to the striped dice. The striped dice module makes things to me, more thinky, more challenging, because they add another level of restrictions as to where you can place them. So out of all the modules, this one I probably will play with the least amount of times, because I already feel at times Sagrada is already like, oh man, stressing me out because of all the restrictions, and you're needing certain numbers and certain colors to fill certain spots, and when you get it, you're pumped, and when you don't get it, you lose the game. And so that's just part of the game that I love so much. But this just adds a little bit more complexity. So I definitely wouldn't teach new players this at all. I would have them play the game a multitude of times before I personally teach them that, because I want them to succeed in the game, even though I want to win. What else does it include? It includes, I said, it has the most content out of all the 3 small expansions. It has rivalry challenge public objectives. So they have this little cup in the corner, and they pretty much bring more interaction into your game. So not necessarily it's just people stealing the dice that you have, but it's also who can have the most of things, light to dark. If you have the most columns ascending or descending in value from 1 to 6 or 6 to 1, then you get 12 points. Second most gets 8. And so there's different things that you'll be trying to do and beat your opponents to certain objectives. So I like these. Again, this will kind of change up the way you play, because if I get 12 and you get 8, I'm already 4 points ahead of you. And some of these private objectives or public objectives would be 3 or 4 points for each column or whatever. And so going from first to second is only 4 points, but if you're playing a 3-player game, first to third is a 7-point swing. So these are quite important. And so if you want more player interaction, I highly suggest playing with these rivalry ones. If you want also even more interaction, then that's where these Pioneer cards come in. And there's a whole bunch of them, and I really like them. And this is probably the thing I like the most about Sagrada Glory, and it is these Pioneer objectives, and they're pretty much just races. The first to complete a 3x3 anywhere in your window takes this 3 points. And again, it's only 3 points, but I like these races where you're trying to beat your opponents to something. I really like that. The first one that can attach or like connect your top to your bottom with diagonal of the same color, 5 victory points. I like that. First one to get any row with, unique colors and values, 7 victory points. That could be a lot of victory points. I get 7, you get none. That's like a 14-point swing, where if you would get and I wouldn't get it, and so I really like these Pioneer objectives. There's a whole bunch of them. First one to fill your whole border of your window takes it 3 victory points. And so I like just that added challenge, that added objective that you're racing. I like those aspects of it. And then finally, you got the Flourish. So then again, there's a whole bunch of these. I think there's 12 of these, and each game you would take 2 of them, and these are just another private objective. Waves. If you can do it, pattern in 2 colors anywhere in your window. So if you have 2 red and then 2 blue or whatever it is, 2 red, 2 blue, anywhere in your pattern, 4 victory points. And so it's just another thing to go for, and just to like melt your brain in a way. Because like this one, like if you can get this one, 8 victory points. Of course, you need to make sure your window pattern that you're taking at the beginning of the game can actually do this. Because if you can't do it, well, joke's on you. But 8 victory points, just another thing. And it says you can, at the beginning, when you hand these out, you can keep 1, you can keep both, or you can keep 0 of them. And so I like that. If you want to have more of a challenge, keep both of them and then see what you can do. And if you just want to be like, I just want to do 1 today, then you can do that. And if you don't want to play with any of them, then don't. That's all right. And so this, again, just create your own restrictions or your own goals. And of course, if you get them, you get the victory points. But if you don't achieve it, then you get minus that many victory points. So it's kind of like go big or go home, or go on play safe, or gamble really high and could win you the game or would lose you the game. So just a bunch of better than decent. A lot of good modules. I like the Flourish one. You can add this in. You could add these in and not use any of these other ones. You could play this just base game. You could also play these Pioneer objectives with just base game. You could play all these with just base game, and if you don't want the stripe dice, if you want a little bit of easier challenge for a session, just leave those stripe dice out. Like I said, I think this one has the most content out of the 3 small facade expansions, and this is probably my favorite. Not probably, it is my favorite because it has the most to offer. More public objectives in the sense of Pioneer objectives, more interaction with those rivalry ones, and then if you just want to challenge yourself at a higher level, you can play with those flourish cards. And if you just want to really have just an old crazy time, well, it's not crazy, but with these strife dice that will kind of stress you out, then play with the strife dice module. But I'm giving this one an 80% chance of meeples. It's my favorite out of the 3. Check it out. And if you haven't played Sagrada, I highly suggest just check it out. Been playing Sagrada more since we played Artisans. We really liked that. We, as in my wife and myself, we really liked that legacy game. So Sagrada, fantastic game. And Glory, just an absolutely fantastic expansion. All the expansions are all pretty decent. But Glory being my favorite. So check it out. My name is Brent. Check us out on Facebook, Cloudy with a Chance of Meeples. Till next time, grab your umbrella. The forecast is cloudy with a chance of meeples.